That's a pretty interesting question, and I think there's quite a few factors to it. So I think they're demonized for a few reasons. Some legitimate in certain ways, and others maybe not as legitimate. So I think that grains and fruit are, by most people who consume them, overconsumed, and therefore lead to possibly some suboptimal health outcomes. Then I would say that people who go from over-consuming them to an appropriate level of consumption or under-consumption see the health benefits because they're no longer over-consuming them and assume that nobody should have these ever. And it's an important thing that we distinguish that just because having less of something is better for your health, it's not necessarily the case that having none of it is even better. Right? So it's a game of balance. And so to look at, and when people experience something with their health in the short to medium term as a result of a health action, they tend to become quite religious about it and feel the need to tell absolutely everybody and say that this is the devil, this is God's nectar, whatever it may be. And it is what it is, right? We just try to seek out the balanced, healthy middle road. But we also recognize that people are at different stages of their health journeys. People have different biological individuality. So it's not a one-size-fits-all world. So those are, maybe reasonable, maybe questionable reasons why they're demonized. Then there are real concrete issues with grains and fruit, I would say. So with grains, they can be high lectin foods, meaning that if people have lectin sensitivities or poor gut health or inflammatory issues or autoimmune issues, grains are going to be problematic. Now, if you maybe prepare these grains in a way that minimizes lectin content, you do the traditional like soaking and sprouting preparation methods, it's going to make it not so bad. If you come from people who ancestrally ate that food and therefore are genetically adapted to that kind of lectin, plus you are doing the ancestral preparation methods, okay, then it's also probably even less bad. So then that combine those with, okay, I'm going to eat these in appropriate moderation and not just have a huge bowl of rice as my staple. Pretty good. And that also assuming that your gut health is in a reasonable place and that you don't have gut health issues and any form of leaky gut or inflammatory issues. Because these lectins, if you're not prepared for them and you haven't minimized them, they can trigger immune responses in a harmful way. The other thing with grains, they can very often be moldy and contaminated with mycotoxins. I'm not going to go off down that rabbit hole right now. I think we have a post coming up about it next week, so that'll give you some more insights. But if you want to talk more about it, by all means, send in a question about why mold and mycotoxins are bad. Would love to talk about that another time. So that's grains, and also depending on what stage of people's health journey they're at, and this can apply to grains and fruit. The amount of carbohydrates and the amount of sugars, assuming like natural fruit sugars, that you should be having is going to vary. If you're recovering from candida, if you're dealing with SIBO, if you're trying to aggressively lose weight, you're probably going to want to have a lot less than if you're in a really great state of health and super physically active, for example. Then going to fruit, I would say that, as I just mentioned, a lot of people have sugar-sensitive conditions. I should add cancer to that list. And so having lots of fruit isn't great, especially because most of the fruit that we have in the modern world, especially in America, has been hybridized to make it as sweet and as sugary as possible, because people have an association with the sweeter and the sugarier, the better, and they just love it. But that's not, when you get fruit that's wild grown, and this goes for many wild-grown plants, it does not have just this, single note of sweetness to it. It has a broad spectrum of flavors that tends to be quite a bit wider than what you get in modern domesticated fruit. It's just how it is. Fruit has been hybridized in the modern world to be as sugary as possible, so that people will like it and buy it more and eat it more. So that, there's that. So you're getting more sugar from fruit than you would ancestrally. And then there's the fact that people tend to, in many circles, overeat it. If you go out into nature, fruit is there, but it's not that abundant. So it would be challenging in nature to consume fruit at the levels that a lot of people do in the modern world. Even this is especially, pointed at people who go heavy fruit in their diet. It's just not a reasonable thing that you would encounter in nature. To do once every now and then because you're having a good time, fine. But on a daily basis to eat huge amounts of fruit, I don't think it's balanced. You can, if you're in a good place of health, to conclude, you can have, a moderate amount of gluten-free grains. You can have a moderate amount of fruit, and the caveat with the grains is prepared in the right way. But they're not right for everybody at every stage of health. So it depends who you are and where you're at with these things.